Hello, this is David from davidcliveprice.com, and this is the podcast edition of this week's e-zine number 18, Is National Pride on Your Asia Business Checklist? I was checking out some TED Talks the other day and I came across one by Hans Rosling, a Swedish professor of global health and a famous statistician, speaker, and author. His speciality is dispelling common myths about the so-called developing world, which he points out is no longer worlds away from the West. What sets Rosling apart isn't just his apt observations of broad social and economic trends, but the stunning way he presents them. You'll have never seen data about the rise of India and China and Japan, and the closing of the gap with the US and UK and Europe presented like this. Using hilarious graphs, tongue-in-cheek descriptions of the rise and relative fall of the colonial powers, and a huge recyclable pointing stick, he gives a crash course on economic history since the 1850s. And he concludes by naming his 100th birthday in July 2049 as the exact time when China and India achieve full economic parity with the West. As he remarks to his amused Indian audience, there's a serious point to this. The national pride of countries like China and India is of enormous importance to their economic and social progress. You can't understand Asia business unless you understand the dynamics of national pride. So what does he mean about colonial humiliation? I thought about this recently when I was talking with a business conference manager from Dubai who said he couldn't understand the China Dream message of the President of China, Xi Jinping, when speaking about the future direction of the country. What's all this about exorcising a century of colonial humiliation, he asked. The China Dream isn't really about innovation, but about borrowing ideas and technology from the West. The same accusation used to be leveled at Japan's economic miracle before the stagflation of the 1990s. Business people in the developed Western economies claimed that Japan was a big imitator, which is how the country became so successful. It was due, of course, to, quote, borrowing from the West. This got me thinking about the question of national pride in Asia. It occurred to me that there's a strong sense of patriotism and self-fulfillment in a whole range of Asian economies. Not only those that became independent from colonial powers, such as India, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam and the Philippines, and indeed South Korea from Japan and Taiwan from Japan. Thailand also has a strong sense of national pride and identity precisely because it was never colonized. And let's not even get started on the division of Korea. Even if some of these events happened more than 50 years ago, the sense of young nationhood or national fulfillment still plays an enormous role in Asia and is a huge driver of economic performance in many of the region's markets. And yet, how many business people from the West consider this when doing business in Asia? How many come to Asia with a feeling, perhaps unconscious, that the way things are done in their own countries is still superior? How often have I heard foreigners in Asia say, "This isn't what I'm used to at all"? Well, there are many cultural and social differences in Asia from the way things are done in, say, London or New York or Sydney or Auckland. But that doesn't mean that they are necessarily inferior or even less efficient. It's up to every company and business to learn the secrets and tools necessary to succeed in Asia. And I would suggest that putting national pride on your checklist for doing business in almost every country in Asia is a good place to start. I'd love to hear from you if you have tips or comments about doing business in China or in other parts of Asia. You can leave them at my blog www.davidcliveprice.com/blog. And of course, please subscribe if you want more on-the-ground intel like this. Just add yourself to the subscription box on www.davidcliveprice.com. And you can also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.